Yesterday was June 16th, which is Bloomsday. Bloomsday has a very strong cultural significance in the city that I grew up in, Dublin, in Ireland, as it is the date in which the book Ulysses by James Joyce is set. It just takes place in one single day in Dublin, June 16th, and it basically is a journey through the consciousness of a couple of individuals, three individuals in the book. Stephen Dedalus, who's Joyce's sort of conscience, Leopold Bloom, an advertising salesman, and his wife Molly Bloom. Now, what would this have to do with the occult? Well, James Joyce's work is very occult-like, very much rooted in probably ideas he picked up as a high-ranking Jesuit at Clongownswood College in County Kildare. Now, no less than Crowley himself, upon reading Ulysses, said that Mr. Joyce would be considered one of the great writers of all time. So that was one magician, recognizing another. I give a description of this in terms of relationships inside sort of occultic relationships in my book Sorcery, the Invocation, in terms of Joyce's relationship both with his wife Nora and with the protagonist in Ulysses, Leopold Bloom, with his dead son and his sort of foster son Stephen. These are kind of repetitive fractals. This is a very powerful thing, and a very little talked about thing within magic and the occult. But it's the idea that when you have this idea of fractalized metaphors, it's probably, I just made it up right now, it's probably a good way to put it, that there are repeating fractals within human behavior and human social and cultural situations that are reflective of repeating patterns within universal constructs or universal happenstance. So, for instance, Joyce in Ulysses took the story of the Iliad and Homer's Odyssey and compressed it into the life of an ordinary man. So therefore it was, when Joyce was, having a row with the citizen in a pub over anti-Semitism, it was reflective of, in the Iliad, Homer and Ulysses and his battle with monsters. You understand? Therefore, and likewise, his time with the brothel was the sirens was the same as the sirens within the Iliad, and also Molly represents the Penelope, the wife of Ulysses in Homer's Iliad. So it's a repeating fractal in terms of a metaphor. Now, life is very much like this in many ways. There was a song by the Police back in the early 80s, and it's one of the reasons I have a lot of time for Sting. It was Synchronicity 2 on the album Synchronicity, and he talks about the fractal metaphor of a person, sort of a kind of a Reginald Parent type individual who's dealing with his shit life, working in industry, and that being reflected by the subconscious emergence of a monster below Loch Ness. Now we know Crowley is there again. If you read my book Sorcery, you'll know that my belief is that the Loch Ness monster was brought into manifestation by Crowley when he failed to complete the Yabba-Melem. He opened the gate, he didn't close Sesame. So when you start to see these ideas of repeated fractals, it's like synchronicities in the same way. In synchronicities, the more you recognize a synchronicity, the more it happens. Like the other day, I was in a supermarket and they played the song "Digging in the Dirt" by Peter Gabriel. Now the song I hadn't heard in a long time. I spoke to the woman behind the counter saying, "Oh, that was a great song. Remember that from the 80s?" And she goes, "Oh yeah, you don't hear much from Peter Gabriel anymore." So when I tell someone else about it, what I heard today in the shops? I heard "Digging in the Dirt" by Peter Gabriel. Well, the other day I go to the market and somebody is selling second-hand LPs and singles, and the first single I pick out of a box, about maybe 400, is the sleeve cover of "Digging in the Dirt" by Peter Gabriel. Now, when this is common, these things happen to me in all my life now, I don't even think twice about it, because I'm engaged with the process of accepting synchronicity. So the same thing applies to these kind of metaphorical fractals. So the idea that there's repeating cycles going out, these kinds of ideas that you've heard me joke about it on Facebook and things like that. But I will often, and we're going back to my Usenet days 20 years ago. I would tell absurd stories as a method of trying to force reality into a different place. I began doing this with the Troubles in Northern Ireland. I was on a Usenet group called social.culture.irish, and when it first started, there was a lot of the Troubles in Northern Ireland were going on, and there was a lot of kind of Catholics and Protestants, Republicans and Unionists, all having a go at each other on this forum, because it was kind of anonymous at the time. And so I began this absurdist thing. Like, I created a third state called the Republic of Unki, and it was a new military that was going to take over Ireland and destroy the Catholics and the Protestants. And it became a big farcical joke, and it became very popular and very funny. It was probably my own version of a keck type thing 20 years ago, and I've been doing this all my life. This is going right back to when I was a teenager in Ballymun. We created false realities. It's because this false reality then becomes a fractal that can affect reality. Now, the funny thing was that when I stopped doing that, the Good Friday Agreement in Northern Ireland happened, and then I moved back to Ireland. It was very weird, but it was almost like, I'm not saying it caused anything like that, but I was tapping into these repeated metaphors. So the absurdity of conflict in Ireland was mirrored in the absurdity of these stories that I came up with. So you see these, and they reflect and they reflect and they reflect. Now, the Indians had a very good understanding of this. In fact, I think those Hindu temples that have all the statues all down them, they're very much like fractals, because if you see how the stories are told, one story spirals into another. So you'd have a story that would relate to, say, different casts of people, but the fractal repeats in different narratives up and down the temple. I'm hoping to get to Sri Lanka after Christmas to do some filming there, and I'll go to these temples and describe this further for you. These are big things we have to know. Now, this is why my work is not for everybody. Like, these people who are into the truth movement and stuff, a lot of you wouldn't understand this. Some of you would, but a lot of you wouldn't. So it's, go back to what you're into. It's not really for you. My idea is we should move you beyond these things, move on all these realities, and look at these ideas of spiraling, altered realities. See, we're in a position now where the internet, and we can see this from the Keck thing and the Pepe thing on 4chan, the internet is no longer a passive experience. It can actually be used to hack reality. Now, my attitude is people like me and oddballs and weirdos like me are the ones who should be hacking reality. Now, and not the Bill Gates and not the Googles and not these Elon Musk types. They should be eccentrics like me. They should be people with a kind of a magical destiny or artistic creative destiny like me, and people just like me, not just me alone, but I mean people just like me. And we need to have a consciousness insurgency upon the digital electromagnetic spectrum in there. Now, you saw a video the other day with those weird noises on my phone. I think they're not cross lines. There were two digital phones. I don't know what that was. It stopped now. But I think that happened just as I was thinking about making this video today. So that's a kind of a synchronistic kind of thing. What it is, it don't matter. It doesn't care. I don't care what it is. I don't care what it means. It means something. You see, this is the whole thing. We have to stop finding absolute meanings in everything, because then we concrete and stratify ourselves within reality in specific dogmatic tangents. So my attitude is I believe in nothing. I just go with what I can assume right now, but everything is arbitrary in the point of being that this information may change completely in 6 months. I may change completely in 6 months. It's not excuse me. It's not because some douchebag came on here last week and said I contradict myself. No, I don't contradict myself. I adapt myself, because reality is passive, and it's arbitrary. It's all arbitrary, so you can go with the flow like a surfer on a surfboard. You don't stand there and wait for the wave to wash over you. You go with the wave. And this is important things. So, metaphor. I'll give an example in Joyce's work again. In Joyce's use of metaphor is supernatural in its genius. So, for instance, like in the story of the dead, I have a theory as a Joycean. This is one of my theories. that Gabriel's conflict with his wife regarding him not having a sexual relationship with her is not because her true love Michael Fury died and that's the only man she ever wants to be with. Yes, on the lower fractal level, that's what that means. On the greater fractal level, my theory is that Gabriel had syphilis. And he could not have his relationship with his wife because of the syphilis. And Michael Fury's death represented the death of his sex life in a romantic, normal sense because of, and it's hinted at in the story, his cycling holidays on the continent. Cycling, riding on the continent. Now, anyone who grew up in Dublin, especially in my generation, it's disappearing now tragically, but especially we used to use the, you hear me say the expression on Velocity and Now the night, throw the granny off the bus for ejaculating after while they're masturbating. We're very good at that. We have this kind of, we had this about us, this kind of, there was a street poem in Dublin. I'll tell you the story about Johnny McGorry. Shall I begin it? Well, that's all that's in it. And we were, I grew up in a very magical place and a very magical mindset. And this is how Dubliners think. We literally exist as metaphors. Very much so, very, very much so, we exist as metaphors. Why that came about, I don't know. It was probably a survival mechanism somehow as a result of maybe colonialism or maybe the Vikings or something. But we have to emulate us today in this new, whatever this new paradigm we're inventing on the internet. We have to emulate these things. So that's why if you go to my Facebook page, it's full of, kind of absurd things and strange things. A lot of that is to disrupt the artificial intelligence from building logs and files and data on me, because it cannot pin me down. And we all have to be the same way. Make yourself a metaphor rather than making yourself a factual, dogmatic representation of systems. And you know what? Not only will you survive, but you will, as we saw with Keck, you will disrupt the system. Look for the repeating fractals. Look for the metaphors within the fractals, both above and below. Maintain an absurdist, almost Dadaist existence. And don't let anyone tell you that you have to be. This is why the old world of the PhDs and they can't get jobs. The ones who are going to university now are now working in Starbucks and McDonald's. That world is over. The day of the intellectual is over. We're in the age of the. It's like the clown in Puccini's opera, the clown Piero. Well, this is Piero's revenge.